Fat phobia is a form of bigotry, right? And a lot of people don't know that because we've been taught that our attitudes towards higher weight people are rightfully negative because of health reasons.
We cannot ignore it anymore. The fat positivity movement is more dangerous than most people realize. We have reached the point where denying the risks of obesity is costing lives. According to the World Health Organization, obesity contributes to over 2.8 million deaths every single year. That's not a small number. We are in a crisis. Yet influencers with massive followings are telling people it's perfectly healthy.
I often dread medical appointments because of blatant medical fat phobia. The last OB appointment I went to, the provider blamed everything on my weight and told me that I needed to go on medication.
And the longer we pretend it is, the more this movement is going to take lives. How far have we really gone? And who is the real problem behind creating this culture of denial? Roots of fat activism. Fat positivity didn't just appear one day on TikTok, it has roots and leaders. It has a history that most people have completely forgotten. And unless we go back to those roots, it's impossible to understand how the movement turned into the extreme version we see today. Let's go back to 1968, often called the true birth year of fat activism. It all began in New York when a man named Bill Fabry organized the first public protest of its kind. He was not an activist in the usual sense. He was simply fed up with how the world treated his wife because of her size. That frustration lit a spark, and it didn't take long before others were stepping into the same fight. Around that same period, an article appeared with the headline, "More People Should Be Fat." It called out everyday discrimination faced by overweight people, from hiring bias to public humiliation. By the early 1970s, the activism had moved west, all the way to California. There, a group of feminists launched a new front called the Fat Underground. They were not interested in polite requests or simple awareness campaigns. They came armed with a manifesto, a document full of bold, even radical demands. They compared the word fat to racial slurs. They claimed doctors were enemies who needed to be held accountable for labeling overweight patients as unhealthy. They even insisted that diet industries should be dismantled altogether that sell pills, books, and supplements. Now let's pause here. Were they completely wrong to call out scams? Not really. At the time, the market was swamped with snake oil solutions, diet pills packed with dangerous stimulants, miracle books promising results with no effort, powders and supplements sold with zero scientific backing. People were desperate, and they were exploited for profit. So yes, those activists had a point about shady products, but then things went too far. Instead of demanding safer, evidence-based tools, they wanted to eliminate the very idea of weight loss. Diet plans, workout programs, and even nutritional aids like protein powder were painted as an attack. It was not about whether the programs worked. It was about how those programs made them feel. To them, being told that weight loss was possible was itself an act of harm, and that idea, extreme as it was, stuck around. The Fat Liberation Manifesto never transformed public health policy. Most of its demands were too unrealistic. But it did succeed in something else. It built solidarity. It gave members of the group a sense of identity and a shared mission to resist what they called diet culture. That unity planted seeds that have grown into the modern fat positivity movement. Today, those seeds have exploded into something far bigger. Fat activism is no longer a fringe protest movement. It is a global online community. Social media turned what was once a handful of local protests into viral campaigns seen by millions. Facebook groups, Instagram pages, and TikTok videos are now a stage for fat positivity. At first glance, some of this doesn't sound harmful. Many influencers focus on reducing bullying, pointing out the cruel jokes and public shaming that overweight people face. That's fair. No one deserves to be degraded because of their body. But there is a darker side. Large corners of social media don't just reject bullying, they glorify obesity itself. They tell followers that weight has no connection to health, that every doctor's warning is fat phobia, and that the world should reshape itself to accommodate them. Algorithms make this worse by building echo chambers. If you engage with a few fat-positive posts, your feed quickly fills with more of the same. Soon, you are surrounded by content that reinforces a single view that being obese is perfectly fine. Inside those echo chambers, you find so much misinformation. Take one example here. There was a comment on a video about fat phobia. Someone claimed they walked 25,000 steps a day, ate only 1,500 calories, and still couldn't lose weight. Anyone with basic knowledge of nutrition knows that's impossible. But instead of challenging the claim, the community rushed to support it. Reality was ignored because it was easier to preserve the comforting lie. And that's the mindset fueling these spaces. They are in denial, and their mindset is reinforced by constant approval. And this is only what we see in public. In reality, there are some private fat liberation groups where the content gets even more extreme. These groups often function like cults. Members are encouraged to reject any outside criticism, demonize doctors, and even attack anyone who decides to lose weight. A girl named Ty shared her story on Reddit. She once weighed 350 pounds and was heavily involved in her local fat liberation group. Every health problem she faced, including spinal issues, hormonal disorders, and depression, was dismissed by her peers. They told her it had nothing to do with her weight. Her daily 40-dollar McDonald's habit was deemed irrelevant by them. They said her body was perfect no matter what, but Ty reached a breaking point. She chose to lose weight, and the response from her group was brutal. She was harassed, insulted, told she was ruining her body, and accused of self-hatred. In the end, she was exiled, cut off for daring to pursue a healthier life. The moment she left their echo chamber, she became the enemy. This is the toxic heart of modern fat activism. Improvement is punished. If you choose to change, you don't belong. And the disturbing reality is that Ty was lucky. She escaped and rebuilt her health. Many others don't. They stay trapped in groups that glorify the very habits killing them. The worst thing this activism is doing is creating distrust in doctors. Medical fat phobia versus medical reality. A growing number of fat activists insist that they can be perfectly healthy at any size, even at morbidly obese levels. And if a doctor dares to suggest otherwise, they call it medical fat phobia. The phrase is used constantly in fat-positive spaces. It describes any situation where a doctor blames weight for health issues instead of digging deeper. And yes, that can happen. Sometimes real problems are brushed aside with a lazy response that the patient needs to lose weight. That's unfair. Patients deserve proper care, and misdiagnoses do exist. But the problem is the idea of medical fat phobia has morphed into a shield. Instead of calling out occasional bad practice, many activists now use it as an excuse to dismiss all medical advice related to weight. It is no longer about wanting fair treatment. They are just silencing reality. Listen to how some patients describe their appointments. They walk in with serious symptoms, but before the doctor can even speak, they set boundaries. They demand that they will not discuss weight or take any weight loss suggestions. Imagine that. A patient refuses to even let a doctor mention the single biggest factor linked to their condition. And when the doctor does bring it up anyway, because ethically they have to, the patient storms out, accusing them of discrimination. That's pure denial. And denial doesn't change biology. Obesity remains one of the top drivers of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, arthritis, infertility, and dozens of cancers. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not, your pancreas, your joints, and your arteries don't care about hashtags. And the worst part is that activists didn't stop at rejecting advice. They built entire movements around the concept. The Health at Every Size community runs with the claim that weight has no bearing on health whatsoever. Leaders within the group actually argue that dieting and exercise cause more harm than obesity itself. Think about that for a second. One of the loudest voices pushing this is Virgie Tovar. She has written multiple books with titles like You Have the Right to Remain Fat. Her message boils down to a simple but dangerous line that your weight has nothing to do with your health, and any suggestion otherwise is bigotry. She even invents bizarre new terms like cake-related fat-phobic incidents, as if someone declining dessert at a party is committing an act of oppression. It would be laughable if it were not so serious. Because Tovar is not just a fringe writer on the internet. She was hired as a health consultant by the San Francisco Department of Public Health. Yes, that's right, a public health agency paid her to advise them, even though she openly encourages people to stop talking about diet and exercise altogether. That's reckless behavior. It is telling citizens to ignore proven tools that could save their lives. And she is not alone. Other influencers take the same idea and crank it up even further. Take Jay Bay, also known as Jay Lynn. She became famous for documenting her struggles traveling while morbidly obese. Her content feels like a list of demands. While traveling, she always complains that tray tables don't lower properly, the airline is discriminating, and the seats are too small. She calls it oppression. Her solution is that airlines should give obese passengers extra seats for free. But let's be clear. A plane seat is a product like any other. If you need two, you pay for two. That's common sense. Yet activists frame this as a human rights issue, and airlines, terrified of backlash, are caving. Did you know Southwest Airlines removed a woman and her 2 teenage daughters from a flight to give extra room to a single obese passenger? Imagine you bought tickets, arrived on time, and were kicked out so someone else could take up more space for free? That's not equality at all. That's prioritizing one group at everyone else's expense. And that's not all. She has demanded raised toilets, redesigned spaces, and accommodations that even people with disabilities struggle to access. Her activism feels like entitlement, and the worst part is it keeps being rewarded. Then there's Dank DeMoss, a rapper weighing over 600 pounds who sued Lyft in 2025. The case was that a driver refused to take her because his small car literally could not handle the weight safely. He suggested she call an XL ride, which is exactly what the service exists for. Instead, she filmed the interaction, accused him of discrimination, and filed a lawsuit. Lyft panicked, apologized, and even fired the driver before the lawsuit was resolved. Taxi forums erupted in outrage, pointing out that the driver was punished for protecting both his car and his passenger. Think about what that says. Companies would rather throw their own workers under the bus than risk being accused of fat phobia. It is easier to sacrifice common sense than face an angry activist with a camera. And that kind of environment only fuels more entitlement. All of this feeds back into the same toxic cycle. Patients ignore medical advice because they are convinced it is prejudice. Influencers glorify obesity as healthy, while companies and institutions bend out of fear. And as a result, the public is becoming increasingly confused about the line between discrimination and reality. Yes, there are real cases of bias in healthcare. Doctors need to be better at listening and diagnosing. But obesity is not a neutral condition. It is a medical emergency that millions are living through. Turning every warning into an act of fat phobia traps people and not protect them. And the truth that no activist wants to hear is that pretending obesity is harmless doesn't make the heart attacks, the strokes, or the collapsed joints disappear. You can deny science on Instagram, but your body will always tell the truth. The reality check. And this is why fat activism keeps getting a bad name. Strip away the hashtags and slogans, and a lot of it is really about coping. Private groups exile people like Ty because they cannot stand to see someone break free and actually improve their health. Jay copes by demanding the world reshape itself around her size. Virgie Tovar copes by trying to shut down any conversation about weight loss. Dank copes by calling basic limits discrimination. And the pattern is clear. They are all avoiding the same hard truth. Because losing weight is difficult. It takes effort, time, and a willingness to admit there is a problem. And that's the part many refuse to face. It is far easier to normalize obesity than to fight it. It is easier to point fingers at society than to confront food addiction, binge habits, or years of inactivity. And when someone does take responsibility, like Ty did, or even celebrities like Lizzo who openly lost weight, they get attacked as traitors. Lizzo was labeled a sellout, shamed by the very community that once praised her. Tell us, how is that body positive? This is the twisted state of modern fat activism. A movement that could have celebrated self-respect and basic dignity now feeds on denial, delusion, and entitlement. At its core, it tells people to stay stuck, Don't question, don't change, don't listen to doctors. Just keep playing along so nobody else feels uncomfortable. But the reality is that obesity is not healthy. No activist can bully doctors into rewriting decades of medical evidence. No lawsuit can magically make a body function like it should, and no hashtag can erase the damage of carrying hundreds of excess pounds. That truth is biology, and everyone has to accept it. What do you think? Are these activists really helping people or pushing them deeper into denial and keeping them stuck in bodies that are breaking down? Share your opinion in the comment section below. If you want more hard truths and stories that most people are too scared to tell, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Goodbye for now.